Welcome to the BiggerPockets Money Podcast, show number 104, where we interview Lauren and Stephen from Trip of a Lifestyle and get their story of financial independence, mini retirement, and designing the life they truly want to live. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Mindy Jensen, and with me as always is my marvelous co-host, Scott Trench. How you doing today, Scott?
It's going great. Lauren and Stephen definitely have built a pretty incredible lifestyle, like almost the millennial dream. You talk about launching yourself towards your dreams. They've done that through hard work, clear understanding of their numbers, and nothing extraordinary, right? Then there's no part of the story that is them getting lucky or taking advantage of a big opportunity. It's just them knowing their numbers, having a plan, and then designing exactly what they wanted from their lifestyle. And I think you're going to really enjoy the show.
I agree 100%. I love hearing their story because, like you said, it's so repeatable. It is so doable if you are just conscious of where you're spending your money. And I think that's one of the core components of their story is, look, we don't make a lot of money, but we also don't spend a lot of money. And that allows us to do what we want to do.
Yeah. And Lauren and Stephen, our guests today, they're going to be entering 2020 in a position capable of kind of sustaining semi-permanent retirement at the ages of 29 and 30. And, that's an incredible lifetime achievement for them. And I don't know, it's a great inspiring show to close out 2019 here and get started on your goals in 2020.
Well, and what's the worst case scenario for their current choices? They have to go back and get a job. Their worst case scenario is your everyday life, Scott. Their worst case scenario is my everyday life. It's everybody else's everyday life, to quote Joel from FI 180 yet again. They're taking a chance. And yeah, maybe the stock market is going to correct and their net worth goes down. It's not going to go to zero instantly. And it'll recover. Most likely, past performance is not indicative of future gains and blah, blah, blah. But they have so much time. And what they're doing now is cash flowing their life. And they get to do whatever they want to do. And that's just the best. So, Scott, let's not tell Lauren and Stephen's story. Let's bring them in and let them tell it because they know it better. Stephen and Lauren from Trip of a Lifestyle, welcome to the BiggerPockets Money Podcast. How are you today?
Great.
Doing great. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've read a little bit on your blog about your story, which I find absolutely fascinating. And I want to know where your journey with money begins and how you got to that point of, the $0 honeymoon, the trip around the national parks for, I don't remember how much that one cost, but where did you start out?
So basically, we both went to the University of Florida. We've been together for a long time, since like late junior year in high school, I guess. But we both ended up going to the University of Florida, and I majored in physics and Lauren majored in journalism. And when we graduated from there, I thought that I really wanted to get a Ph.D. in physics and like become a professor and all that stuff and do research. So I got accepted to the University of California, Irvine, and we moved across the country to California, and it was great, except that, So California was great, but it was also very expensive.
Yes.
And so I kind of also, while I was there, learned that I didn't really want a PhD in physics as much as I thought I did. And so while we were there, I was a grad student. I was working as a TA, and Lauren took a full-time job, basically like a secretary type position at a design company there. And we were chugging along. Everything was okay, but I was kind of just getting really burned out on physics pretty quickly. And we weren't making a ton of money, and it was really expensive to live there. So anyway, what I did realize was the part of my job that I really liked a lot was being a TA and actually teaching students and dealing with students directly, and not so much like the working toward the research and learning more like higher level physics and stuff. So fell in love with teaching, got this email from the University of Central Florida that said they would give me free tuition if I came back to Florida, as long as I would be a public school teacher for 1 year. So we packed up and we moved back across the country again, back to our home state of Florida, Orlando area, UCF. And I did that program to get a master's degree in education. And I worked as a teacher. I ended up working as a teacher for 2 years. And Lauren also took a job. She can tell you about that, I guess.
Yeah, I did marketing for a small financial firm in the greater Orlando area. But it was kind of our first foray into like real adulthood. We both had full-time jobs. I mean, I was working full-time in California, but this was like a first titled position and it felt very official and fancy. And, we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment and trying to save as much money as we could. And actually in California, I think is when we started, kind of being first on our own out of college, where we're thinking, okay, what's the next step? We can work and earn money, but then what do you do with your money? And that's kind of where we first started kind of getting interested in learning more about personal finance.
Yeah. So by the time like we got to Orlando, I think we were like pretty interested in, we're going to save as much money as possible. And we had just started reading Mr. Money Mustache and like learning a little bit about financial independence and stuff. Yeah. Lauren sent me the link to that one day when she, I guess, was bored reading some stuff at work. And
Lauren found it first.
She did. And yeah, so we were really into it by the time we started this whole adventure in Orlando. And so we spent 2 years working full time there. And I was a public school teacher. Lauren was making just under my salary. So we both had pretty similar, I think we were around like $40K a year, just under $40K a year each. And in those 2 years, we were able to add over $100,000 to our net worth by just living as simply as possible. And after those 2 years is when we decided to do that whole Hawaii honeymoon thing.
So in the period prior to moving to Orlando, it sounds like you attended college, got an advanced degree at UC Irvine, right?
I did not complete a degree there, but I did go there for 9 months.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Did you come out of that experience with negative net worth or student loan debt or anything like that, or how did you kind of manage your money in that time period?
Yeah. Okay. So, but going back a little bit to college, right? In college, neither one of us came out with any student loan debt. We both have different stories on that. My story is pretty simple and not very impressive. My story is I focused on school, and my parents basically helped me through college and paid for, I had a scholarship that paid for my tuition, actually, and then my parents paid for my basic living expenses. So I was able to graduate debt-free. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was debt-free. And Lauren actually worked her way through college all on her own. She had the same scholarship that I had for tuition in terms of living expenses and stuff. For the majority of college, she worked as a server at Chili's. And
I worked at the local paper and I worked at Chili's. And then kind of throughout college, I started being able to switch into more in my field. It was kind of scary to like let go of what I felt was really steady and like good income from waiting tables. At least it was more predictable than knowing like what news might happen that day that I would be able to write about or take pictures of and get paid for in the local market. And so that was kind of, a little unnerving, but it did work out. And, I graduated also without any debt. I had a few scholarships, and the one Stephen was talking about is like statewide in Florida. If you're getting good enough grades and stuff, you used to be able to get most of your tuition covered. And so that's what we both did. And then for grad school with physics, a lot of times they will cover your costs because it's like not common degree that they want people to be doing.
In general, in science, when you go for a PhD, you work as a TA or a researcher, and that stipend covers your tuition plus a very small salary, like $20K a year, something like that.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, great. So you move back to Orlando and you discover Mr. Money Mustache. What do you do to drive that level of savings? What's the kind of day to day like to save $100,000 in 2 years on 80K combined?
Yeah. For the last, like, honestly, forever since then, the last like 7 or 8 years, we've shared one car between the two of us. So that's been like a really big boon to our finances. Not having to deal with depreciation and insurance and gas and maintenance on a second vehicle. So we've always very strategically chosen where to live, including back then in Orlando, to live as close as possible to at least one of our jobs, if not both. So that's allowed me to ride my bicycle to work everywhere we've lived, several different places for the last 7 or 8 years. So that's one huge thing that makes a much bigger difference than you might think. The other thing is just sort of in general, we were pretty fresh out of college still there. And we had very limited income with very high expenses in California. So kind of by necessity in California, we just learned to continue that college lifestyle into adulthood. Like even after you get your full-time job, you just kind of keep living like a college student, share a 1-bedroom apartment, and, eat cheaply, cook at home, that sort of thing. And if you do eat out, it's like Chipotle, not like a real restaurant or whatever. So we kind of continued that lifestyle, honestly, indefinitely, because I think we
Still
both
kind of live that lifestyle.
We do kind of still live that lifestyle, because I think just neither one of us is really unhappy with that at all. It doesn't really cause us any stress or anything. So just sort of living as if we were college students, I guess you would say.
We had all the same furniture from college.
Yeah, we kept our college furniture, and if we bought something new, it was usually from IKEA and that sort of thing. We're not too picky about possessions for the most part. So I think just like those general things helped a lot. And I would say, I don't know. It just comes down to a lot of little small things, but the biggest ones for sure are choosing a small place to live that's close to work, and then sharing one vehicle between two people would be the biggest ones. And then we did do some side hustles too. We've always, including now, shared like a photography business together. So that's brought in a little bit of extra income, shooting like weddings and portraits and stuff like that. And we do a lot of random little stuff like selling things on eBay and all kinds of little random things to bring in a little bit of extra cash. But for the most part, our income source has been full-time jobs.
Got it. What was your kind of monthly income and expenses in that period? And did it change throughout that period? Did you get better and better as you went through those 2 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say it didn't change drastically. And in fact, it hasn't really changed drastically over the course of the last 7 or 8 years. Our total annual expenses between the two of us has always ranged somewhere between like $18,000 and $25,000 combined. And I would say just recently that has increased significantly because we're having to buy private health insurance plans on the healthcare.gov marketplace instead of having like work sponsored plans or whatever, because we're sort of transitioning into like part-time work now. So only recently that has kind of shot upward because of healthcare costs. But other than that, yeah, between like 18 and 25K a year combined for expenses. And back at that time, our salaries combined were around 80K combined together. And then we had some side hustles that probably added up to, I don't know, maybe $10,000 a year or something like that. Don't know exact numbers, but yeah.
No, perfect. Okay, so you have about 90K in income, and you have about 20,000 to 25,000, 18, 25,000 in expenses, you said. So what are you doing with the cash that you're accumulating? Are you putting it in a 401k? Are you investing it, stock buying a savings account, or what was the use that money went to?
Yeah, we both had work sponsored retirement plans that we contributed in just enough to get the full match. So we did that. And then obviously there's a lot of extra cash building up because our expenses were dramatically lower than our income. So the rest of that was maxing out 2 Roth IRAs every year and investing those funds into mostly just low-cost Vanguard index funds like VTI, stuff like that. And then even still after maxing those out, there's additional cash, and that just went into a taxable brokerage account. And so we bought more, total stock market index funds, basically. It's pretty boring, to be honest with you, but that's what we did.
But it was constant and easy and worked.
No, I hate this so much because no one can repeat this story. Right?
Right.
Everything you did here is completely secret that that has never uncovered before secret.
Yeah.
That you guys pioneered. No, I love it. That's fantastic. You learn the formula, you follow the formula, and you're not doing anything crazy. You're both working very normal jobs, and you're obviously spending some time hustling, and you're living an intentional lifestyle, and clearly know your numbers throughout this period, right?
Definitely.
Yes.
They're clearly top of mind. What's like the next turning point in your financial journey after that 100K?
So the next turning point, I guess, was that after 2 years of full-time work and saving really hard, I know it sounds kind of silly, like, oh, 2 years. We both felt really burned out on full-time work. And I think that's really just a product of being, like 24 years old or however old we were. I guess we were like 24-ish. It just seemed like an eternity for like full-time work. And it's not that I didn't like being a teacher. I liked it. And I don't think Lauren had any big problems with her job either, but it just seemed like, man, 5 days a week for real. We have to wake up at 7:00 in the morning and go to work.
And I actually, my work was a little bit further, so I had a little bit of a commute. And so just like every day driving and getting to work and then driving home, and our schedules were a little bit off too, because as a teacher, you got off work at 3 p.m. and I didn't get home until 6 p.m. And then, we're losing this time together, and it's kind of snowballed into like, what are we doing? And in that time, we also got married in 2014 in November, middle of the school year. So we decided to kind of figure out a different plan for our honeymoon.
Yeah. So, that I guess is the turning point really. As we got married, we thought about what do we want to do for like a little break, for a honeymoon. You're supposed to do that, I guess. So most people, will take like a week or two off work and use the vacation time and then go somewhere exotic and have a good time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when we thought about it, we were like, well, gee, like to go somewhere for a couple weeks might cost us several $1,000s depending on where we go. And that's just a huge amount of money compared to when you're used to spending $20K a year on two people or whatever for 2 weeks. So it was like, wow, how are we going to spend that much money in such a short period of time? That doesn't really make sense. So our idea was, what if instead we were to move somewhere, like on a semi-permanent basis, like for maybe 6 months or something like that, keep it open-ended, and sort of turn it into like an extended vacation, and maybe even do a little bit of work along the way that didn't feel like work because it was just like a small amount of part-time work, and try to just like cash flow and pay the bills just barely instead of saving, 75% of our income or whatever it may be. And so we said, you know what? We've never been to Hawaii before. Everyone says Hawaii is awesome. Don't really know anything about it, but let's do this. Let's let the school year end, which was still like, I don't know, I think like 8 months out or something like that at that point. Let's let the school year end, finish off the school year, and then let's just fly to Hawaii and just say, we live here now, and try not to work, try to work as little as possible while we're there and stay as long as we feel like, let's say roughly 6 months, something like that. So that's what we did. We went to Hawaii and we hung out there for 6 months, and we cash flowed it. We worked very little, maybe like 10 hours a week or so while we were there. And by the time we got back, our net worth had actually gone up a teeny tiny little bit, like $1,000 or something. So it basically cost us nothing is the way we like to look at it.
That's awesome.
What preparations did you do to go to Hawaii? Because it doesn't, the way you said that doesn't make it sound like you did a lot of preparing.
We did not do a lot of preparing. We literally moved. We had a friend whose parents lived on Oahu, and they were gone the week that we were getting into town. And so they're like, you can stay in our house.
Well, to be clear, at that point, we didn't even know which island we were going to be living on. So we landed in Honolulu, and we stayed at their house for like a few days. And that was just to see, like, do we like Oahu as an island or not?
Mm-hmm. We had some ideas about, like, we had heard good things about the Big Island, Hawaii, but, it was also mixed with, oh, it's really country and like you might not like it. And we were like, how could it be super, we're from Florida, his family's from Georgia. Like, how country could it be? And so we went to the Big Island. We loved it. It was open spaces, tons to explore. Wasn't crowded at all.
It's a lot cheaper too.
A lot cheaper
lower
than
population
Oahu.
density and stuff.
And it kind of gave us a taste of what we'd been working for the past 2 years. We kind of had this notion of financial independence. Now we had this goal that we had been saving toward, and taking this little break was like, this is what life could be like. This is why we're kind of been doing this. Having these self-directed days where we wake up and say, what do you want to do? You want to drive across the island and go explore some waterfalls today? Like, that was really encouraging for us. And then the fact that we came out of it, plus $1,000.
Yeah, but in terms of the planning though, like, it was actually a pretty funny story, because like we got to Oahu, no idea that we were gonna, whether we were gonna live on that island or not, decided not to, checked out the Big Island, loved it. And then like, we didn't have a place to live there. Like, we didn't know anyone on that island or anything like that. And so you would think like the natural thing to do would be like, okay, get a hotel for like a couple weeks and like sort of figure out your life or whatever.
They're still expensive on that island.
But yeah, hotels are expensive. And like we were used to like, we spend $20,000 a year like on our whole life. So that seems like a lot of money. We're not going to do that. So we got a rental car, a Nissan Versa Note, which has it's like a hatchback type thing. And so bottom line is it's big enough to sleep in. And so, yeah.
Like every couple of days we would get a hotel room, but we split the difference by staying in the car, because it was a lot cheaper that way. And you could explore a little bit easier too.
Yeah. So we slept in the back of a rental car while we frantically searched for an apartment to rent and a car to buy. And so eventually we found an apartment that was 2 bedrooms, which was much bigger than we needed. We didn't really want a 2-bedroom, but it was really cheap. It was like, I think $965 a month, something like that. And it was literally across the street from the beach. Like, you could hear waves crashing from the front door, which was pretty crazy. And so we snapped that up as fast as possible. And then we ended up buying a used car, a little Mazda Miata. It was a 2000. And we paid $4,500 for that. When we left the island 6 months later, we sold that thing for $5,600. So we made $1,100 on our used car.
That's our positive.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's your net worth uptick.
That's the net worth uptick right there. Yeah, that's right.
So at the very least, you have $965 rent, and you got to eat, right? So how are you cash flowing the rest of this while you're there?
So before we left town, I mean, Stephen was working as a public school teacher, so there wasn't a lot of flexibility in his position. But with my company, I was working for a small firm, and I told them pretty well in advance about our plans. And I said, there's a lot that I do day to day that can be done remotely. And if you'd like me to continue to do any of my responsibilities in Hawaii, like, I will make that work. I'll wake up. It's 5 hours of difference between the two. So like, I'll wake up whenever you need me to and do the work. Like, it's totally fine. I'm doing whatever I want, so I can do that. And that actually worked out. And I did maybe about 10 hours a week of work for them while we were on the island as a contractor. And then we booked some photography gigs. Stephen did pick up some private tutoring clients.
Yeah. So since I was a teacher, I couldn't like transition my job to remote. Like, that's not really a thing, but that's when I kind of got into private tutoring. So I had a couple of clients that I was already working with, like remotely via Skype. And so, yeah, I just transitioned that and picked up a couple more. I even tutored some people locally and basically did that maybe 10 hours a week. And so between those two things, that totally cash flowed our expenses. I think our total expenses on the island while we were living in Hawaii was about $1,800 a month for everything combined.
We also ate a lot of rice to keep costs low.
We did eat a lot of rice. We bought like I don't even know, 20 or 30 pound bag of rice on day one at Costco. And we did actually almost finish the whole thing by the time we left.
Yeah.
So,
Were you able to save anything in Hawaii, or did you just come out net zero?
So what we mainly focus on is our total net worth, and our total net worth change was about plus $1,000. Okay. And that includes everything altogether. And in terms of investments, just to be clear on that, because, you'd think, well, is some of that made up by just the market going up while you're there? I think our portfolio return was about -1% while we were in Hawaii. So we actually lost money on our investments while we were there. So it was really legitimately just our 10 hours a week of work cash flowed our $1,800 a month in expenses.
Yeah, that was 2015, like from probably June, July through December. I think we left like the beginning of January 2016 from Hawaii.
Yep.
Yeah, and you got to live in Hawaii.
Yeah,
it was really fun. It was cool, and we have a lot of pictures up on our blog from that and stuff too. So,
with your trip, in terms of mentally getting ready to leave your job and kind of go to Hawaii and just see what's going on for 6 months, how important was the grind that you had put in for the 2 years previous to that? Was that really what gave you the confidence to go ahead and make the trip? Do you think you would have been able to, that you could have just done it without ever going through that in the first place? Or
so I think the answer is yes and yes. Like, do I think we could have done it with $0 in the bank? Not zero, but let's say we had $10,000 instead of $100,000, right? Yes, I think we definitely could have done it. I mean, our upfront costs were a $4,500 car and 1 month of rent or whatever, right? So would we have felt comfortable doing that or responsible in any way doing that? No, I don't think so at all. So I think that, knowing that we had set financial goals for ourselves ahead of time and more than accomplished them and done really well for the previous 2 years and felt like, wow, we put in some work, we're making very fast progress toward financial independence, made us feel like, hey, this is not an irresponsible thing for us to do. And there's really no way to fail, because even if you call it $2,000 a month times 6 months, right? I mean, we could have paid for the whole entire trip out of pocket, even if we made $0 while we were there. So it felt completely safe and doable the whole entire time. And I credit that entirely to the savings and stuff we put in beforehand. So I would not have wanted to do it any other way. But is it possible? Yes, it is definitely possible to do it.
Great answer.
So what did you do when you returned to the mainland?
So, that was something that we talked about while we were there, because we had a 6-month lease on that place across the beach. And, we talked about it a lot of like, what are we going to do next? What do those next steps look like? And we love our college town. We love Gainesville. It's pretty low cost of living place. Our best friend lives there. It's not too far from family. Our family's all in the Tampa Bay area, so it's about 2.5 hours away. And we're like, what if we went back to Gainesville? There's the college there, so there's going to be opportunities for Stephen to do tutoring stuff, teaching stuff, whatever. There's a market, we kind of decided, like, why don't we, let's go back to work. I don't feel like we're done. Like, we could probably keep living this lifestyle and never get further ahead than we are today. We could work harder, but it's a little bit more difficult in Hawaii. There's not a ton of opportunities in the fields that we specialize in. So let's move back to the mainland. Let's figure out how to do that and, get right back into it. And we actually ended up looking for houses, and we bought a condo in Gainesville, about 2 miles from the university, really close, easy to bike to. And
yeah, we paid $71,000 for a 3-2 condo in Gainesville a few years ago.
Yeah. 2016.
You have a 3-bedroom condo and you paid $71,000 for it?
Yeah. So
to be fair, we have high condo fees, but
Gainesville is a very affordable place to live. I think our condo now is worth a little over $100,000 a few years later. So definitely a little more expensive now. I mean, everything's been going up, but it's a very affordable place to live. That's one of the main reasons that we decided, hey, that would be a good place to head back to, because I think we were both still very sold on the idea of financial independence. We weren't going to just call it quits and say like, oh, we have $100,000. Let's just
be beach bums.
live paycheck to paycheck and be beach bums for the rest of our lives. So I think we came back from that trip really re-energized, and we had enough money to buy a house for cash, and that's what we did. And so our expenses went, dipped even lower because of that. And then we both ended up landing jobs that paid more than we were making before. So I actually started out just continuing that private tutoring thing that I was doing in Hawaii. And instead, I just went really hard on it. Like I made business cards. I went and stood outside classes at the University of Florida, handed out cards to every single person, and like built up this Rolodex of like tons and tons of tutoring clients and stuff. And I made that like a 40+ hour a week job. And Lauren landed a full-time job with like a digital marketing company in town. And so we were working full-time, and then I ended up getting picked up by a private tutoring company that I still work for today, actually. And so we were able to save at a significantly faster rate for the next 3 years or so.
When we kind of felt a little burned out again.
Well, I guess we saved for about 2.5, something like that years. Yeah.
When you say significantly faster, are you saying significantly faster than prior to when your trip to Hawaii?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So before Hawaii, I was a public school teacher, and Lauren was making roughly the same money. And now we found ourselves, increasing our incomes. And
decreasing our costs.
We decreased our expenses, yeah.
Because we bought the condo.
Because we had a house paid in cash. So we didn't really experience any lifestyle inflation, and we moved to a very low cost of living area, and I continued to ride my bike to work. We shared one car and did the whole same deal over again with higher incomes and lower expenses. So
it was very fast tracked.
Very fast track to financial independence, yeah.
Do you do anything with those extra 2 bedrooms? You said that the 2-bedroom in Hawaii was too much space, and then you came and bought more space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Honestly,
we felt that. We were told.
And I'm not judging. I'm not judging. I'm just.
Well, when you're shopping for a house, we ended up actually getting a realtor because it was difficult to get in contact on our own with realtors to like go see houses and things like that. We found it actually a little challenging, more so than I thought it should be. But everyone always tells you like, oh, you want more space. And if you have guest rooms, people will come and visit you. And that's not necessarily true. At least not as much as you would think, like not worth the extra space and cost involved with having a larger place. But we did, in fact, we had this extra space, and we're like, why do we have this extra space? And we actually rented out the room to 2 different friends at 2 different times throughout that 2.5-year span.
Yeah, so we were able to turn one of those rooms basically into an extra $500 a month for some of that time. We actually didn't rent it out all the time, and currently nobody's living there. We still live in the same condo, and it's just us, and the place is way too big for us, and we never ever set foot in one of the rooms, and the other one's used as an office. That's probably unnecessary too. But the truth is we just got the place so cheap that it was like, why not? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
And then we could tell people that they can come visit us because we've got the extra room. That's what they tell you anyway.
Yeah. But definitely buying a place that's bigger than you need and renting out a bedroom, it is a big boon to your finances. I mean, even if we had like a 30-year mortgage on that place, just the rent from one room could probably pay that mortgage, based on how cheap it was.
So over this 3-year period, you guys are earning more income. You're somewhat partially offsetting your housing expense for some of the time, at least. What do you do with the money at that point? Do you continue to take your match? Do you max out your 401k? What's your strategy for asset allocation?
Yeah, so my job does not offer any benefits of any kind. No healthcare, no 401k, none of that stuff. Lauren's did offer like a normal retirement plan and healthcare and stuff like that. So she, again, just grabbed the full match on her retirement plan. And then we continued every single year without skipping a beat to max out 2 IRAs. We did end up switching to a traditional IRA at some point because it was more advantageous tax-wise. But we maxed out IRAs, 2 IRAs every year. And actually, just this year, we got to max out an HSA for the first time because we had to buy a private health plan, which not really a good thing, but extra tax advantages. And and then all the extra money just went into a taxable brokerage account and Vanguard index funds. Pretty simple approach, same deal that we've always done. And that's worked out really well for us.
Awesome. And it sounds like there was another milestone about 2.5 years into this cycle. Is that right? So can you walk us through that change?
Yeah. So, as we kind of alluded to, we go through these like patterns where we're working really hard, saving hard. I mean, we also were still doing our photography business in this new full-time, higher earning gigs that we were in. So, a couple years in and you're again feeling a little like, all right, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? It's a lot. Maybe we need a break, come back renewed again, feel refreshed. And so we're kind of looking at it like, well, Hawaii worked out really well. What could we do? We have this house, so we don't, we're not going to just like sell it right now. Like what could we do that would make sense? And we've been to some national parks just in general and traveling in Hawaii. And we were like, it might be nice, how many are there? Could we do a trip where maybe we went to all of them? And so we did a little bit of research looking at Google Maps. There's 61 parks, how spread out are they? How much could we, do? And how much time could Steven step away from his job, or I step away from my job? Will we tell our employer? So we kind of had this like checklist of things that whether we fell into or not in Hawaii, we knew we should like figure out for our next adventure. And so we kind of settled into this. I think it could take, 6 to 8-ish months to do all the parks on the kind of schedule that we would like. And then how do we make that work? And so that's kind of what we did. We went to all 61 national parks in 7 months. And there are a lot of things that went into that to make it work. But that was the reason being is we were, again, kind of burned out and ready for another like break, another fun experience. And
we have the same goals, to try to work out a way to pay for that trip in its entirety while on the trip without really feeling like we were working. And so, that's what we did.
Well.
So
go ahead.
What did that look like? What did you do?
Okay.
During
sure.
the trip?
So first off, just to keep expenses super low on that trip, because that's part of paying for it, is you say, well, where am I going to stay? I'm going to be in a different town practically every night. We're going to 61 different national parks, and there are all kinds of different places. So how can we keep the expenses low? That's really the first question. And so to keep the expenses low, main thing we did was we bought a little tiny van, a Nissan NV200, and we put a bed in the back of it. Really not fancy.
It's just big enough in the back for this full-size bed, like literally corner to corner.
Yeah, we basically built a wooden platform in the back and threw a bed on top of that. That takes up all the space. There's no it's not like a proper RV or anything like that, but it's enough to sleep in. So we slept in that van for probably 6 out of the 7 months in total. So that probably saved us $15,000 in hotels or something like that.
And we tried to stay in free locations too. Like we didn't necessarily camp in campgrounds because those usually carry a $20 to $30 cost to, rent that space out. We often were at travel centers or Walmart parking lots to keep that accommodation costs low.
Yeah. So we did the trip super cheap in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways it was really cheap is that you don't pay for entertainment when you're traveling around to national parks. I mean, you buy one $80 national parks pass, and that's all the entertainment you really need. Like you're not feeling the need to do anything else that's expensive or whatever. So that was pretty cool, is that you don't really have to spend anything on entertainment. It's just like gas and travel and food and stuff like that. And we slept in the back of a van. So that's how we kept the expenses low. And then in terms of income, like there were significant expenses. So how do we pay for all those expenses? Again, we tried the same deal. So this time we both had jobs that we both felt at least had some components that could be done remotely. Lauren's entire job practically could be done remotely. Mine, some of it could be done remotely and others couldn't. So we both gave our employers probably about 6 months of notice before we were going to leave on this trip. And so, we already had it in our minds, like, we're in a financially good place. If they say no, we're just going to quit the jobs. It's not a big deal. But we gave them like 6 months of notice and said, hey, we're going to go on this trip. And if you'd like, we could work part-time for you while we're on the road and maybe even come back full-time afterward. So would you be game for that? Like, what do you think? So my boss was into it. He was like, yeah, let's do that. Sounds good. So we worked out a deal, and I had about 10 hours a week again of work to do on the road that could all be done remotely. And Lauren got into a conversation with her employer about it. They didn't say no, but ultimately it came down to they wanted to cut her rate of pay for the fact that she would be remote instead of in person. And she just didn't really feel like that was a good deal. So she actually declined that offer and she quit the job. And then on the road, kind of halfway through, we started our blog. And that ended up not making any money while we were on the road, obviously in its infancy, but it was fun to do. And Lauren picked up a freelance gig doing marketing for like a small nonprofit. So that brought in a little extra income as well.
And a few other things that I picked up along the way since then. But
yeah. And I mean,
we also the house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. So we have this condo that's paid for, and it's just sitting there. So we moved all our stuff out of it into a friend's loft, and we rented that thing out on a 7-month lease for our 7-month trip.
That story is interesting, though.
Yeah, that's true, actually. So you guys like real estate, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. We listed that we had never been landlords or done really any kind of real estate investing type stuff.
Other than our friends living in our
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah, I guess if you count that. But so, we were new to this, but we were very like do-it-yourselfy about a lot of stuff. So we said, all right, well, we're going to try this landlord thing like all on our own, no help. We're going to list the condo on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. They're free, pay for no advertising, see what happens. Let's do this. So we listed them up, had plenty of bites, but no one that wanted the period of lease that we wanted. Obviously, like 7 months is like an odd term. And then like people who, were qualified to actually rent the place. So we showed it to a bunch of people, not a lot of success. It was kind of discouraging.
They all wanted to move in like that day, or they wanted to live in it forever. And we're like, we're probably coming back. So no.
Yeah, we wanted to be honest with people and tell them like, listen, yeah, we probably are coming back here. So I don't want to tell you can live here for the rest of your life with your family or whatever. So we were kind of discouraged. We couldn't find a place or a renter. So on the very last day, like the day we were
last weekend, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the night before we left for our road trip. I dropped off the keys to our condo with a property management company, and we were just going to take the 10+% hit on all that and let somebody else handle it. And maybe it would be vacant for a month, and who knows, but whatever. It is what it is.
Something is better than nothing.
Something's better than nothing. So we dropped off our keys with a property management company, and then one more guy called us like the night before we left on our trip and was like, will you show me the place? So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll show you the place. We were still there. It was empty. And then he turned out to be a good lead, and we actually rented to him, drove back the next day, took our keys back from the property management company, and gave them to this guy, paid 0 fees. He paid ahead of time every single month and left the place in decent enough shape when we came back. And honestly, it was a very good landlording experience. I don't want to say that's what's going to happen every time we ever try this in the future, but we had a really lucky and good experience with that. And he rented it for exactly 7 months and paid everything on time. So that was pretty cool.
He only called us once, and it was to have the shelving reinstalled.
Reinstalled, yeah. So
in the closet,
cost
like
me
it fallen or
$50.
something.
So the expenses were very low on that.
Yeah.
Did you screen this tenant? Did you run his background and do a credit check and all of that?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very quickly in the middle of the night, learned how to do that. Yeah.
Well, we had done some screening of prior.
Yeah, that's true. That's
like
true.
We kind of had some idea of
we
what we wanted to know about potential tenants.
Yeah.
So going back to your trip and cash flowing it, can you give us a brief rundown of what the expenses were? You said that there were still some significant expenses. And then Mindy and I both have the same question here, I think, which is, how did you get internet in these national parks
to
do your jobs remotely?
Yeah. So regarding the expenses, the national parks trip was very, very expensive for us. It is not what I would call like a super frugal vacation or whatever. So the total trip for 7 months of living, and this includes everything we paid for it. It includes private health insurance. It includes the gas, the depreciation on the car, our cell phones, our hosting for our blog. Like it includes like every single thing we paid for. We included every penny of expenses, but the total came to about $37,000 for 7 months, which obviously compared to living on $20K a year, that's a crazy amount of money for us. But to put that in context, though, I mean, if you look at like an average middle-class family, spending $37,000 in 7 months equates to how much in 12 months? Like 50 or 60K in 12 months? That's still like, compared to the typical middle-class family, it's actually very doable, right? I mean, comparing those numbers just to put it in context, but it was a lot of money for us still.
It also included some of the most expensive type of travel that you can do. I mean, in Alaska, for example, there are 8 national parks. 5 of them are not on the road system. You have to charter your own plane to take just you into the national park. So you're buying a pilot and a plane for a few hours, and it's very expensive. And that's just Alaska. We had to go to American Samoa, Hawaii, U.S. Virgin Islands. Those flights were all pretty expensive, and if you take out those,
and you can't sleep in the van there. You have no van, so these are expensive hotels in exotic places. So the fact that we were absolutely insistent on reaching a goal of doing all 61 national parks cost us dearly. Like that was a huge amount of money. So
we paid for that.
Yeah. And I don't regret that at all. But if you wanted to do a cheaper version of this trip, you would just go to everything that you can get to in the van and sleep in the van, and the trip is much cheaper.
We did the cost on that, actually. It was how much percent?
We did. It was 41% less money to skip the, I think, 12. No,
I don't know.
It's 5 in Alaska and 3 more. 8 most expensive national parks. To skip the 8 most expensive national parks out of 61 reduces the total cost of the trip by 41%. We have, I'll try not to quote too many numbers because we have this whole cost breakdown on our blog, and it's really
graphs, everything
detailed, and it's better to look there than to listen to my memory or either one of our memories. But yes, you could do this trip a lot cheaper if you wanted to. But
how awesome were the 8 parks you had to fly to get
to? They were
awesome.
Really cool. Yeah.
I mean, you don't see like an active volcano like just here in the mainland. So.
Absolutely. And American Samoa is like practically like a foreign country. I mean, it's technically part of the United States, but it's just territory. It's completely different than
98% native population, I think.
Yeah, it's a totally different culture, and you got to like really just see what life is like completely somewhere else. It didn't feel like the United States at all. So that was just totally unique and different. That place is twice as far from California as Hawaii is. So it's like practically across the globe. It's in the southern hemisphere as well.
It's closer to like Australia, New Zealand than it is to us.
Yeah, so it was definitely worth it. Those experiences were awesome. But if you're looking at this and saying, how could I do it on a smaller budget? You absolutely can. You just have to skip those places that require these crazy flights and hotel stays and rental cars and whatever else. So.
And we did have to get some hotels some of the time because of weather occurrences. So we left for this trip in January. We're from Florida, so we don't know anything about the winter. And we started driving, and winter happens a lot, and it stays there, just hangs around, and there's snow and ice. And if it's below like 25 degrees, it's a little too cold to sleep in the van. So there were a few nights during the winter where we just had to get a hotel room. I mean, the van doors are like frozen shut. We couldn't, it wasn't doable.
Yeah, one night I literally could not access the van because it was frozen shut. Yeah.
So it's nights like those that we were like, well, we'll get a cheap hotel room. But
why didn't you start the trip in like April?
Part of it was for Steven's job. So he had to be back for the fall semester because of the way the university runs. And for their,
I see. Yeah.
So we left in January with the 7 months. And then by the time we got back to the southeast, it was July, which is really hot. Also not comfortable for the sleep in the van. So there was a little bit, if we had all the time in the world, we could have made it where we never had to get a hotel room. But due to the time constraints and because we were being completist about it, there are a lot more costs.
No, that's great.
And regarding like cash flowing the trip and doing work while you're on the road and stuff.
Oh yeah, we didn't answer that at all.
Yeah, so I think like we definitely learned something on this trip about ourselves and about work in general, which is like it's really easy when you're at home working 40 or 50 hours a week to get burned out very quickly. Like, as you can see for us, we're getting burned out like roughly every 2 years of work. Like, so we're going hard, right? But while we were on this trip, we're actively doing really fun outdoor stuff every single day and like getting exercise and like being in wide open spaces and all that every single day. So you might think like, well, do you get tired of that? And the answer is yes, you do kind of get tired of that to some extent. So what we kind of ended up doing was almost like an inverted work schedule where instead of 5 days of work and 2 days off, it was like 5 days of fun and like 1 to 2 days every week sitting in a Starbucks in a city with accommodations and stuff, and just like working an 8-hour day at a computer or whatever. And what we found though was like, that was not miserable at all. It was actually
felt really good to be productive.
Yeah, it was fun to say like, I'm sitting down, I'm earning money, I'm getting some work done, I'm having a rest, I'm grabbing a cup of coffee, and this feels good. Like my job actually feels good again. And so this lifestyle, like it could have been indefinite. And actually that we're kind of like toying with the idea right now that
so
like,
we're at a little bit now.
like, why don't we do that all the time? It just feels good. Like we're not the type of people who want to like fully retire, like not do any work or earn any money for the rest of our lives.
Sit in a rocking chair.
But like, if we can not touch our investments whatsoever, just working 10 hours a week, and it feels good and it's fun to do that work, and it keeps your life interesting a little bit with variety, why not do that? So we're kind of starting to look at that idea actually, like for next year, maybe.
No, that's awesome. Okay, so you finish this trip and it's amazing, and you're cash flowing it, and you've discovered all these things about yourself. What happens following that?
Yeah.
Well, we came back. Stephen, had worked out with his boss. Part of the negotiations for him being on the road was he would come back full time in the fall. So that was the plan. For me, it was a little open-ended. I kind of mentioned previously that I had picked up a few different gigs at this point. And it's still pretty part-time work in terms of the amount of work that I'm doing. But for a couple different companies doing freelance stuff and then running the blog. And then Stephen being full-time. And so my schedule was a lot more free, but Stephen's wasn't. And, for him, it kind of got right back into that 5 days a week working, 2 days a week off. And, we were like, this isn't as fun, especially with only one of us being more flexible than the other. And, what are we doing? And actually, Stephen just ended up negotiating for this year to have a more flexible schedule. And he's now part-time starting in January. But when we came back, on the trip, we thought it's going to be just like Hawaii. We're going to come back to our home and we're going to get right back to the grind. But what we found on the trip that worked so well was we didn't touch any of our investments. They kept growing and we cash flowed the trip and we were still saving money somehow. Maybe not on the trip, but getting back.
When we say we cash flowed this trip, I mean, honestly, the rental income from our house plus the work that we did paid for the full $37,000 of the trip. But on top of that, the market has been significantly up during that period. And our nest egg is a lot bigger than it was back when we did the Hawaii trip. So we actually increased our net worth by a lot while we were on the national parks trip. So I think part of it is we came back from that and I went back to full-time work, and we both were kind of just asking ourselves, like, why exactly are we doing that? Like, we're actually in a very good financial position now. And it's like, should we slow down on saving a little bit? Like, do we really need to hit like the exact calculated like financial independence official number, or should we like slow down, taper off a little bit and
enjoy what we've built so far? Like, we don't have to be going to every national park. We could be doing whatever we want. We could be visiting family more. We could be finding out which beach in Florida is the best, because I don't know the answer to that. Little things like that we could just enjoy more of the day to day, as opposed to why are we buckling back down and working so hard again when we don't really need to.
So bottom line is I think in 2020 and onward, we're probably both indefinitely part-time employees for conceivably forever from this point forward. So
as a part-time employee, can you still contribute to your 401ks? Or do you have to switch over?
I don't have any benefits at my job, and I never have had any benefits at my job. So there's no health insurance, there's no 401k, there's none of that to worry about. Anyway, I was responsible for all of that on my own. Lauren, since she quit her job entirely before we went on the national parks trip, she has replaced that with like 3 or 4 different freelance gigs in addition to our blog, as like what she's doing sort of part-time now. So neither of us has access to any kind of like 401k or any kind of employer benefits at all. So we're paying for private health insurance out of pocket, which definitely has increased our living expenses. And we're just contributing to 2 IRAs and an HSA, maxing all of those out every year, and the rest goes into taxable brokerage account.
Okay. Are you employed by this company, or are you a contractor?
So starting next year, I'll be a contractor. I have been an employee, a full-time employee, but with no benefits.
Okay. Oh, that stinks.
Yeah.
So let's see. Your next life is, how do I say this without sounding snotty? Because it's awesome. It's like a cobbled together income stream. You've got multiple income streams.
Yeah. And so and in addition to, 3 or 4 different freelance gigs that Lauren has, we have our photography business. We have my contract work for my company. And then we also have this investment portfolio that's, significant in size now and actually is turning out to be a real source of income that counts for something, versus when we were in college, it's like, oh, we made $10 this year on investments, but
just out.
When did you get back from the national park trip? What year?
This year, August. So this year we did the trip from January to
perfect.
August.
So you finished the trip, and then now you're looking at the next thing already because, sorry, that clears up some timeline.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just happened, and the experiences that we had are still very fresh, and we're trying to figure out how to capitalize on that. We had this great experience. We love this, work feeling fun and, kind of fitting work into your schedule instead of fitting your schedule around work.
Yeah. I think we're trying to hit that sweet spot of like how many hours of work is a fun amount of hours of work, and just sticking with that forever.
While still covering expenses.
Yeah.
No, so I like what you just said. We're we're fitting work into our schedule instead of fitting our schedule around work. Back on, I think it was episode 11, Joel from FI 180 said, "What's the worst that could happen? My worst case scenario is I have to go back and get it."
Exactly. Yeah, that's how that's exactly how we feel, because I'm 29, Lauren's 30. Like, we have time ahead of us. So even if everyone always says like, what will you do if the market crashes and you lose all your money and all this, and worst case crazy scenarios? It's like, well, then in that case, we won't be any worse off than, most other 29 and 30-year-olds, really. I mean, we'll just go back to work and do what we have to do. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and what are the odds that all of your investments will suddenly plummet to zero?
Of course, astronomically low, especially since we have never taken any kind of leveraged position. So we don't have a mortgage, and we don't have investment properties with mortgages. We don't have debt. So, I mean, if you have zero leverage in your portfolio and, the market crashes, I feel like worst case scenarios maybe minus 50%, something like that. So.
And you just wait it out.
Yeah. And then, you don't need these retirement accounts until you're retired. And you just said you're 29 and 30. So I don't like the word cobbled together, but it's kind of cobbled together. We've created the life that we want. You enjoy tutoring. Some.
Exactly. Yeah. Some. That's exactly it. I mean, I chose this profession because I love doing it. Like, I really do love teaching physics, but I don't want to be doing that 40 and 50 hours a week, so.
Well, and I would assume that there's an opportunity for extra work around midterms and finals.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you needed, if somebody needed some extra physics help right at the end, oh, sure, I can work 20 hours this week instead of 10.
So that's the other thing that I learned. When we first came back from Hawaii, I actually didn't have a job. I cobbled together my own full-time job with about 40 hours a week of private tutoring clients, just one-on-one, that I gathered myself, like from handing out business cards and stuff. And what I learned during that time was very empowering, which is at any moment, if I need extra income, I can go back to that. I can go hand out some business cards outside, after everyone got done taking a big exam, and I can gather together a whole bunch of tutoring clients and make $60 an hour or whatever it may be.
And that you can turn that faucet of clients on and off too.
Yeah, you can take one client or 10. I mean, it is completely variable. So finding a skill that's able to be dialed to any specific work amount that you want, like tutoring is a really good example of that. It's really valuable. So, I'd encourage people to look at like freelance gigs that are scalable, I guess, like scale back, scale forward, however much income you need, you just take on that much work.
I have a kind of different type of question with this last one. When you started out in your careers, you're both making $80,000 a year combined plus the side hustles. Do you ever think back to some of the peers that you were working with at that time and the different choices that you made there, and like what do you think the reason is that your outcome is the rare outcome, and maybe other people are not able to accumulate net worth and not able to enjoy lots of the lifestyle, the crazy lifestyle adventures that you guys have had?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question that we're very interested in answering because we really do want to help other people do the same thing. And you know, as an educator, I think my automatic answer is education. Our K through 12 education system really doesn't talk at all about finances or taxes or investments or anything like that. I think it's a major, major problem. And, you know, some of it is education. Some of it is probably marketing. You know, we just live in like sort of a consumerist culture where you're constantly being bombarded with like perfectly tuned psychological advertisements to get you to buy as much stuff as possible and the biggest house you can possibly buy and as many cars as you can afford to have in your driveway and all that stuff. So I think our society is very much set up like to make you consume as much as possible. So the ideas behind financial independence are kind of rare in our society. So I don't think it's that our outcome is rare because it's almost impossible to attain or anything like that. I think it's rare because the ideas behind those outcomes are very rare to come by. And so that's a huge reason why we started our blog and why we want to like get these ideas out to as many people as possible, is just to say like, hey, these ideas changed our life. And we hope that at least some of these ideas, maybe not all of them apply to everybody, but at least some of these ideas can change your life too.
And I think, you know, a big part of that too is even if they have been exposed to certain, you know, good measures that they should be taking in their lives financially, that they don't necessarily believe that it's worth it. Like, so what if I save for retirement? What does that even mean? Like, what they can't really quantify why they should be doing the things that they're doing. And I think that's, you know, part of the reason that we try to lead with the fun stuff that we've done is because I think it helps give people more of a reason, like, well, why should you do this? Well, because it can be really fun and you can do the things that you want to do. And it's not just buckle down and save really hard and deprive yourself of all the fun stuff. No, you can have fun along the way. And I think that's a really big part of what we try to, especially when we talk to our friends, but on our blog too, is convincing people that it's worth the slight effort that it might feel like in the beginning.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of the hidden secret behind our story, I think, is we tell these stories about, we get people to listen to us by saying, we went to all 61 national parks. It's so cool. We lived in Hawaii for 6 months. You should listen to us. And then the real message we're trying to get across secretly is all of this is only possible through, you know, making sometimes tough, but overall definitely worth it financial choices.
And that you can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also part of that is really that grind, right? You said you used that word several times to describe your story, but that 2-year period where you spent $18,000 to $24,000 and earned $80,000, right? And it kind of burnt you out, and it was kind of hard after a while. Is, I think, maybe the price of admission into this lifestyle. I think, you know, almost everybody that we've had on the show that's in kind of this age bracket that you guys and myself are in and are experiencing this kind of FI lifestyle has paid that price in some form or other, whether it's on the income or expense or both or whatever side.
Yeah, I definitely think the working full time and selling your time part is really the price that you pay. I would try to emphasize to people that once you get into it and once you realize the why behind what you're doing, the keeping your expenses low part turns out not to be a price that you pay. It turns out not, at least for us, to be something that we dread or regret or have to take a break from. So repeatedly we keep saying, well, we worked for 2 years full time and then we really felt like we needed a break, right? What we didn't need a break from was the low expenses part. We found that like for me, just something as simple as like riding my bike to work. At first, it's like, really, I have to ride a bike to work every day? Like, that seems like a huge sacrifice, and I'm going to do that indefinitely for the rest of my life or whatever. And then I tried it, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting exercise, burning calories every day, keeping my heart healthy. I am way more awake when I get to work, and added benefit, I'm getting rich because of it. Like, a lot of the things that you find yourself cutting back on make you reevaluate, like, what's important in life. And it turns out the cutting your expenses part, I think, turns out not to be a sacrifice at all. It's really the selling your time part that I think is the main sacrifice.
Well, and I think that your peers are also burned out after 2 years, but the choices that they make don't allow them to take a 6-month break to Hawaii. So is it worth it to, and I know this sounds super judgy, and it's my podcast, so I can be judgy, but is it worth it to have the new car and the, fancy clothes and go out to dinner every night and all of that when you can't take, like, their break is a 1-week vacation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Earlier you said that some people take a 1 or 2 week vacation honeymoon. I don't know a lot of people that took a 2-week honeymoon. I know a lot of people that took a 1-week honeymoon.
Yeah, that's true.
And because you don't have that kind of time. You can't take 2 whole weeks off of work in a row, Stephen.
Yeah, you're right. My bad. Yeah, I think, regardless of what choices other people decide to make, everybody's different. They get to make whatever choices they want. At least everyone should consider the question of, am I doing this because it's what everyone else around me is doing, or am I doing this because these things are what I really value and really want in life? And if you come to a different conclusion than me about what you really value in life, that's okay. It's not a big deal. But you should at least consider the question, right? Consider the alternatives. So that's what we're trying to bring to the table is, what are the alternatives to what everybody else is doing?
I think it's fantastic. Great advice, and yeah,
Thank you.
I think we understand why we don't, like the four of us understand why everyone isn't going down that path, and why many people seem to be kind of just wandering, not saving, investing, working long hours, and not really having to find these things. And it's answer those questions and then go out and make it happen. Yep. That's all you guys have done. Twice now.
Thank you.
Well, 3 times. Yeah, it looks like.
One of the hardest parts of my life is not preaching to people that I see making what I consider mistakes in their finances. It was a sign of maturity when I finally said, I'm not the boss of the world, but I really want to be. And I just want to show people you can do it. Whatever fixed income is in your life that you can't get over, things like healthcare issues. I know somebody who's a diabetic and their costs are $11,000 a year. That's a fixed cost forever. So that's just part of your expenses. But that doesn't mean you can't become financially independent.
Absolutely.
Right.
But you have to make the steps. You have to take the steps to become financially independent. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, you should just increase your income instead of reducing your expenses. Well, okay, that's a great choice. It's not always available for everybody, although I think that there's a lot that you can do, side gigs and things like that. But everybody I know can reduce their expenses. Everybody I know, including me, has some pretty not necessary expenses in their balance sheet. So
Agreed.
When you live on less, you have to do less to have the same lifestyle. I just
and I feel like
really want to hammer that home.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the things too that doesn't get talked about a lot, even in like the financial independence community, there's a lot of focus on reaching like this end goal, but your number. But I think that there's something to be said for temporary measures. People want to maybe move to a particular city and live there because they feel they identify with it. That's where they want to be, right? Well, if you can't afford to live there right now, what if you scale back? You don't have to live in, Kansas forever, but you could live there maybe 2 years in a low cost of living area, get your stuff together and figure out a way to make that work. I mean, another part of our messaging too is for us, getting started, I mean, right after college, we got into personal finance. We didn't want to make any missteps because, we both have seen how that can severely mess you up down the road if you just make you make a couple mistakes here and there with your finances, and how it can snowball as you get older. And so we were really excited to figure out the right steps, those steps that we wanted to take that made sense for us. And starting young really helped. I mean, right out of college, we got to it, and it was easier then too, because our line for acceptability, like what is good, our furniture was fine. We didn't need a $7,000 kitchen table that's made of oak. Like, we don't need that. We don't want that. And we can't afford that. And that kind of helps if you have that line lower and you kind of keep it low. And that's part of what has been successful for us. And I think reaching young people who are open and interested in getting their stuff together, figuring it out. No one wants to work forever, I don't think. And even if they're passionate about something, at some point you're going to be 50 years old and saying, like, is it over? Can I take a break?
Nope. Makes perfect sense to me. Should we move on to the famous four?
Sure.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to cover before we get into that?
No, honestly, I think we covered like our whole story, which was great. And it was nice that we got to go in like chronological order. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, chronological order is always...
It makes a lot more sense than having to double back and be like, well, what we didn't say was...
Yeah. Okay. It is now time for the famous four questions. These are the same four questions we ask of all of our guests. Lauren and Stephen, are you ready?
Ready.
Yes.
Okay. And you can answer these individually too. You don't have to like come to a consensus on what is your favorite finance book. You can each have your own.
We gave it some thought beforehand.
Yeah. I think we would say Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. He was over last night. I had Friendsgiving last night and he's in
Aw.
town
Oh, that's
visiting.
cool.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's great. Great book.
Tell him we exist.
Everyone should get that book, and everyone should listen to the audio book.
Yeah.
Because he has a very soothing voice. All right. What was your biggest money mistake?
Here you go.
Biggest money mistake? Yeah. Ironically, I think our biggest money mistake was seeing a financial advisor. So when we lived in California, right out of college while I was in grad school, we had just started to really save, and we had like $10,000 saved up at one point. And we said, we know what we're supposed to do with this. We're supposed to invest this money. So we don't know anything about investing. So let's go down to our bank, Chase Bank. Let's go see an investment advisor and see what they have to say. And this guy sold us into this actively managed bond fund that had a huge load fee on it and a high expense ratio. And I'm not even sure why we were in a bond fund at age 22. Because
it paid him a lot of money.
Yeah, no, that is the answer. Mm-hmm. I guess I am sure why. And it did pay him a lot of money, and it didn't perform well. And even if it did perform well, it would have been still the wrong thing, like without that prior knowledge. So that was our biggest mistake, I think. It didn't cost us that much in the long run. I mean, we were only investing $10,000, and of course, you can sell those shares down the road, which we did, and buy the right thing. So it didn't cost us that much money, but it just felt like a big mistake because I felt like, we put our trust in someone and kind of
an authority figure, someone who's supposed to know,
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt bad. So that's what I would consider our biggest financial mistake.
And if you're listening, you're not saying necessarily that the biggest mistake was seeing a financial advisor, but I think it was probably seeing a financial advisor that was not a fee only financial advisor.
I definitely think there's advantage to seeing one that is like a flat rate fee type of situation where they're paid to give advice, not paid to sell you into a specific type of fund. I definitely think there's some advantage there. We ended up not ever doing that. We did our own research and reading, but yeah, I definitely think that's the better path to go if you're going to see a financial advisor. And I'm sure there's tons of really good financial advisors out there.
We're not dissing the profession necessarily. Yeah. We're just saying.
I mean, in some way, we kind of are financial advisors. We're telling people financial advice, but so we're definitely not saying you're bad if you're a financial advisor. But yeah, the whole commission-based financial investing advice industry, I think, is a flawed system fundamentally. I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a dying breed as well.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope so, because commission-based is not acting in your client's best interest. You're acting in your own best interest, and that's kind of douchey.
Yeah.
So sorry, but it is. So on episode 41 of the BiggerPockets Money podcast, we interviewed Kyle Mast, who was unbelievable. He dropped so much information about fee-based financial advisors. He gave you a place to go look for a financial advisor, the XY Planning Network, and I want to say that's xyplanning.com. And then he came back again in episode 84 to give advice for people who aren't necessarily early retirees. They're more normal aged retirees. But his advice in that first episode was just go to a financial advisor and show them what you have. Pay for an hour or two of advice and consultation. They can look at what you have, where you want to be, and say, hey, here are some options.
Sure.
And when they're fee-based, they're not going to steer you into a actively managed bond fund at age 22.
No, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's common sense when you think about it. I mean,
we were just young.
Well, but
We
how do
didn't
you
know any better.
Yeah.
If you don't know, then
Yeah.
you don't know.
For sure.
Listen,
Right.
what I don't know about physics
Yeah,
could fit into the Grand Canyon.
it's not rocket science.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know anything about rocket science either.
I figured that's
Okay. What is your best piece of advice for people who are just starting out besides don't start investing in an actively managed bond fund when you're 22?
Yeah. So I mean, I think if you're ever struggling to sort of figure out where to get started, the place to get started is definitely in your mindset. And so our main advice to people is to think about, when you think about money, think that money can buy two things for you. It can buy things, possessions,
Stuff.
or it can buy freedom. And so once you make the switch in your mind that money is able to purchase freedom, purchase your time back, in the form of when you invest that money, it pays you forward for the rest of your life and you don't have to go to work as a result of that. Once you realize that money can buy freedom, you start realizing that when you're giving up something that you would normally purchase, you're not just giving it up for some weird, like, ethereal concept or whatever. You're giving it up to buy something that you want more, which is your own freedom and your own, self-direction over your own days going forward.
Which we kind of touched on
Absolutely.
earlier.
All right, now it's time for the most difficult question of the famous four. What is your favorite joke to tell at parties?
Okay, so recently I was at my friend's daughter's birthday party. It was the 2-year-old's birthday party, but they have a 5-year-old as well. And they both love dinosaurs. So I asked them, what do you call a sleeping dinosaur?
I don't know.
A Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh, nice.
It's good for 5-year-olds, we promise.
Yeah, they really liked it.
Yes. And it's great for the listeners of BiggerPockets Money. Where can people find out more about you guys?
So our website is tripofalifestyle.com. We also have an Instagram, a Facebook. Twitter is a little bit different. It's TOA Lifestyle because of character limits.
And it's just Trip of a Lifestyle on Facebook and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
we will include links to all of the things we talked about here, including that article where you have all the graphs and all the charts and all the everything from your trip around the country at biggerpockets.com/moneyshow104. Lauren and Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your story today. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
thank
having
you.
us. We really enjoyed chatting with you guys. It was great.
And Stephen, when my daughter gets into physics in high school, I am calling you because I am not qualified to tutor her.
Sounds good. Hit me up.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.